I believe, is the minutes from October 8th. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to accept the minutes from October 8th.
Second.
All in favor? Or any discussion, I should say? Nope. All in favor? I'm not seeing any hands from Gary or Julian.
Oh, I wasn't there, so it's hard for me to
Okay.
profess knowledge on it.
Gary, didn't you see all that stuff we assigned you?
You know, I was so grateful.
Okay, we're done with that. Announcements. The next meeting is December 10th, although I noticed on the website it was not listed. So I presume that's just a website issue. Let's see, and the next thing is staff update. So Stu, if you have things that don't otherwise have a slot in the agenda.
Yeah, I could give just a shorty update. I guess if there's any questions about something in particular, that would be helpful. But since I did miss the last meeting, I feel half caught up. But I guess some of the things that might be of interest, you know, we opened up the new car chargers just around the time of the last meeting. That was great. We're about to start, hopefully next week, a new incentive program for electric bikes and electric vehicles. Next week or the following week, depending on any administrative hurdles we might come up against. But shooting for Monday. Let's see.
Is that bike info on the website someplace?
No, the pages aren't public yet, but they will be real soon.
Okay.
Short version is a $300 incentive for Class 1 e-bikes purchased at an Ashland shop for customers of Ashland Electric. We have also, I have a bunch of things I could tell you about, but in the interest of time, I think maybe I should not. Does that work for you folks, or do you want me just to like share whatever floats up?
I acknowledge your good discretion.
Let's progress with the agenda, because I think let me just check one other spot.
Hey Stu, when you put it like that, it makes it sound too tempting to not want to see. Do you suppose you might be able to send us an email?
Well, it would be really helpful to know if there's a particular topic, because I can't just summarize all the different things. I did a count. Now, they're not all active projects, but on my project list, there are 153 different potential things that could be going on right now. So I can tell you about the things I'm working on this month. Maybe that would be interesting. I'm doing some extra research into the on-bill financing. I've already communicated with Bob and several of the folks on the committee here about each of your all's different projects, or most of you anyway. So I've been digging into the on-bill financing a little bit, spending quite a bit of time getting these new zero emission vehicle incentives up and running. Like I said, hopefully that'll be next week. Also wrapping up this Road to Go grant program that we started. I recently finished, well, that'd be another thing to say, I guess. I just submitted a new grant with DEQ right when I came back from vacation, actually, for a materials flow study. And that's in collaboration with SOU. So looking at materials flow through Ashland. No word yet if we will get that grant, but we wrote it. Had some discussions with Electrify America about their potential interest in putting fast charging in and around this area, but that didn't yield any substantive conclusions just yet. Let's see here. We've got our rare volunteer, Bridget. She's been hard at work developing some new web content for us. It just so happens that City of Ashland is, after many years of our current web platform, going to be pivoting to a new platform pretty soon, and the climate department is planning to be the first rollout of that. So we're still building the site. I don't have it to show you yet, unfortunately, but hopefully soon. We're working with the developers on it right now. So let's see. That's all. I think some other things I'll mention will come up as we talk about your individual projects.
Okay, Bob, I think you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, no, I also wanted to echo, it's really helpful to have these updates from Stu. So thanks, Stu. And I appreciate that, you're trying to save time and everything, but I'm also noting that, we have several members of the community that are actually watching this, this commission, including Aliana Darrow from the Tidings. So it's really nice to get some of the great work that you're doing out into the community, because I think a lot of people just, aren't really aware unless you toot Ashland's horn occasionally. So. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other announcements from the other commissioners? Jeff, your hand went up.
Just a couple quick ones. Today, the Oregon Department of Energy released a 600-page biennial energy report. I highly recommend that. It's very, very substantive and very comprehensive. So it should be something that we all spend a little bit of time with. ODOT has a EV charging infrastructure meeting November 17th virtually. So if people are interested in that. And then the Oregon Global Warming Commission's biennial report is due out in the next couple of weeks. There's a draft available. It has 27 recommendations. It's a very ambitious report. It includes things like ZEVs, smart grid-enabled neighborhood microgrids, requiring municipalities to develop climate action plans. We already got one, so that's good. But there's, it's fairly detailed, but it's only roughly 100 pages compared to the 600-page DOE report. And I can follow up with links to those to Elizabeth if.
Yeah, please do.
You said that's Oregon DOE?
Yes.
Okay.
Stu, I think you raised your hand.
Yeah, just a quick note. If it's the same advisory group that I'm thinking of, Jeff, I plan to be participating on that.
Okay.
Okay, any other announcements from commissioners? Seeing none, I think, Elizabeth, do you have Linda there?
She's coming on right now.
Here I am.
Hi, Linda.
Howdy. I'm the Transportation Commission Chair, and while the Transportation System Plan update and the Revitalized Downtown project have been suspended, the efforts of Commissioner Schaaf to continue exploring the 20 is Plenty project is invaluable. We're finding that collaboration amongst city commissions is an important tool to aid in the communication from citizens to commissions to council and back to citizens. The more commissions interact on projects such as this one, the better. Integrating climate considerations within the TSP not only meets goals of the SEEP, but it also meets the mission of the Transportation Commission to enhance Ashland's livability, character, and natural environment. With your approval and with the approval of the Transportation Commission on November 19th at our meeting, we will assign at least one commissioner to the 20 is Plenty work group led by Commissioner Schaaf at your approval.
Okay, thank you, Linda.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't think there is any public forum. Is that correct, Elizabeth? Okay. So I think we should move on. I'm presuming that Steve is available today. Is that correct?
I will just promote him in, and I think there might be a few other people presenting with him. So
Yes, I am here now.
Hi,
It
Steve.
took a minute for it to all link in. So thank you very much, Commissioner Barth and members of the commission. So for your public record, I'm Steve Vincent with Avista Utilities. And while I'm here to represent Avista, I also want to let you all know that I was actually loaned by Avista to be a founding board member of Earth Advantage. And I served there from 2005 when we first created the nonprofit until 2015. And I even took about a 6-year term on the board. So I enjoyed talking to Adam and Stu a time or two about how to advance sustainable building standards in Ashland. So thought I just, that little highlight there, it's a fun one for me. So again, thanks for inviting me this afternoon. I'm going to cover a handful of things here. First, a little bit about the history of heat in Ashland. Just so you know, as a community, we can kind of remind ourselves of how we once heated our homes and businesses, and then a little history on Avista, really for the purpose of allowing you to evaluate us as a partner in reducing fossil fuel consumption in Ashland. And then I'll talk about why we really have been unable to transition until now due to limitations in state laws. And then kind of finally what the future looks like for us in reducing dependence on fossil fuel-based natural gas. Now, I'll just tell you, I'm reading from something here. So if you need to interrupt me, I might not see you wave your hands, but hopefully I'll get through this quick enough and leave a lot of time for Q&A. So just before I jump into these though, I do want to take a minute. I want to tell you about a phone call that I had with a single mom who lives on Weimer in a rental property kind of close to North Main. And this phone call was about 2 years ago, so I don't know where she is today, but at the time she was about 6 months behind on paying her utility bills, had a terrible ankle injury. I remember she'd lost her job and she was really worried about her utilities being shut off because she was so far behind. And I think we talked for about an hour about all the challenges in life and what I think she just needed somebody to listen and not judge her for her situation. And, when we ended the call, it was a positive note, but unfortunately it really didn't do anything to solve her financial crisis. And so I often wonder where she is today. And so I use that as an example to ask that what you all consider in policy recommendations to the city council, that we keep people like her in mind, that, whatever policies are created, that they don't create greater economic hardship for her and others. And so if you hear me advocating a position on behalf of Avista, it's really kind of that phone call that I have in mind, as well as others in the community who are, somehow disadvantaged that, I'm thinking of when, you're going through policy considerations. So first, just some interesting history on heating homes, school buildings, businesses a century ago. I don't know if you all are aware, but there were about a half a dozen coal mining companies in Ashland. There was one called Ashland Coal Company. They were mining about 4 miles east of downtown. There's another one half mile from Lithia Springs. And then 2 companies that were actually mining coal out of the Van Dyke Cliffs that are up near Grizzly Peak. Now, most of these were operating from about the 1890s till about 1915. And it was mainly started to supply coal to the railroad, but that really didn't last for long. And so then we had consumers from Grants Pass to Ashland, heating homes and businesses with coal that was delivered in buckets. And I found one company that was even mining about 300 tons a day. So, it's almost impossible to find these coal mines today because it's overgrown with trees and wildlife. And there's still evidence, if you've ever heard of Coal Mine Road in East Medford. And then we have some 100-year-old buildings that still have coal chutes that somebody like George Kramer would probably be able to spot. And I've even seen a coal chute in the Criterion Theater in downtown Medford. So I just tell you the history, just because it's interesting and make us a little bit grateful that that's in the distant past, but it's not meant to sort of suggest that we can be complacent today, that somehow we've arrived. But I do see it as a sort of a decades transition in energy use, from coal to propane that was used widely across the Rogue Valley, then natural gas, and then what we're going to do next. So certainly room for improvement. And I would say that we're kind of at a transition point in the energy sector. So a little history on Avista, and again, to sort of evaluate us as a partner in your climate action plan. So the history of Avista real quick, founded as an electric utility as Washington Water Power on the Spokane River in 1889. Thomas Edison was actually involved in it to some extent. So in eastern Washington and northern Idaho, we're serving just under 400,000 homes and commercial buildings. And the natural gas side didn't actually come into the business until the 1950s, and that covers much of the same areas of eastern Washington and northern Idaho. But a lot like the city of Ashland's hydro resources through BPA, Avista is predominantly a hydro-based utility. So we're fossil fuel free with about 57 to 60% of our power from renewable generation. About 30 years ago, we actually built the first utility scale biomass power plant in the country. Kind of looks like the one out in White City that biomass runs, but we built it for purely the purpose of generating power from wood waste. And then of course, we've since added wind and solar generation, including a community solar program that seems to be working well. And we were also the first utility in the country to actually create an energy conservation program that's funded through customers in a surcharge on the bill. So all of these things, we're fortunate. It's made us the 8th greenest or lowest carbon footprint utility in the country. And but we're not done there. We actually recently declared a goal of 100% carbon neutral by 2027 and 100% renewable power generation by 2045. And some of this will actually be achieved quickly with the exit of a coal power plant in eastern Montana in just 2025, so about 4 years from now. Now on the natural gas side of the business, I just thought I'd kind of give you a history of who we are on the electric side, because I think it's relevant in where we want to press for change. So on the natural gas side of the business, here's where I want to thank Commissioner Barth for your email to Adam with some specific things that you would like to cover. So an overview. So we have about 100,000 homes and commercial buildings from Roseburg to Ashland along the I-5 corridor, over in Klamath Falls, and all the way up in La Grande, which is about a 4-hour drive east of Portland. Now, each of these communities, again, 100 years ago, had a lot of different local utilities that were running them, and kind of a need for economies of scale is what brought them together, somewhere around the 1920s. So here in particular in the Rogue Valley, there was a company called California Pacific Utilities that ran from the 1930s until 1991, when they put it up for sale, and then Washington Water Power bought it. So Vista is actually just a name change that we did in the late 1990s. So let me kind of transition to where the renewable natural gas requirements come in. Nothing really had been adopted by any of the legislatures or the governors through executive orders in Washington and Oregon. So we've been kind of stuck in statute up until really July 1 of this year. And if you all think about legislatures across the country as they started passing laws to regulate utilities, 100 years ago, it was really about controlling prices so that as utilities consolidated and created monopolies, that there was really kind of a regulatory counterbalance to what utilities would charge customers. And so all these utility commissions really have sort of strict statutes on how they restrict utilities on expenses, which is where you get the least cost plan. You know, we've been told it's the lowest cost source of energy, and anything other than that wouldn't be allowed. So the renewable power generation requirements for electric utilities, I gotta say, they were never an idea of regulators, because it's just not in their DNA. It's not in their mission. They don't even have the environmental side. That's the EPAs or the DEQs. So they would only allow us as electric utilities the cheapest source of energy. And so it took policymakers, as you could imagine, to declare a greater good or a need for change, which is probably where it kind of started. And I think that's where we would expect policy change to start is among policymakers and not regulators. So on the electric side in Oregon, Pacific Power and Portland General Electric came into the renewable power generation requirement in 1999. And so that's what we're seeing there. But it really wasn't until the 2019 legislative session where a change in statute allowed for natural gas utilities to begin to look at non-fossil fuel-based gases. So Senate Bill 98 is the bill that is kind of the hallmark for us. It passed with really wide bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate. And in fact, it was Senator Golden who presented the bill for passage in the Senate chamber. So I kind of appreciate that that's part of that Senate bill. And I think it allows us to advocate more for the change that we're going to make here, in the future. So then the Oregon Public Utility Commission took them a year to draft the rules around this. And those rules were effective on July 1 of this year. So had I tried to come and present to you 6 months ago or a year ago, I wouldn't have had that to tell you. And so I think it'd be a little bit behind the curve. So now here we are, the bill was passed. And, I'd say prior to the bill, as a utility, since we're, regulated as a least cost plan, we really couldn't spend a whole lot of time and effort in payroll on chasing things that the utility commission would say, well, you're not allowed to do that. There's no statute that allows you to do that. So here we are, kind of a transition point. And so I guess I'd say, while you've all been working on your climate action plan, our hands have been kind of tied and have been really kind of limited to simply providing Adam and Stu information about natural gas use in Ashland, number of customers, and things that help you craft your position. And so now that's all changed effective July 1. So I'm excited to tell you about the changes we're looking to make, but I also want to ask for your partnership, or maybe I should reverse that and ask if you would consider allowing us to partner with you in achieving your fossil fuel reduction goals. So with Senate Bill 98, we can now pursue new renewable natural gas resources, and there are a variety of things that we're looking at. Dry Creek landfill east of Medford probably represents our most local opportunity for bringing in renewable natural gas. Don't know how many of you are aware, so they are generating about 3 megawatts of power using the methane that comes out of the landfill. But then the other half of their methane production, they're just flaring. They don't have the means to sort of get it out by wire. So we're definitely looking at that, and in a conversation with them right now about perhaps how to bring that into our distribution system for local use. There's also other wastewater treatment plants that across Oregon, not as many that are local, that we can take a look at, and dairies and other things. So there's kind of a path there. We're just, I'd say, 5 or 6 months into kind of having that statutory authority to now go chase it. So let's see, Commissioner Barth, you also asked specifically on the hydrogen production and hydrogen injection. We're actively looking at it. We just don't have a project to announce or some groundbreaking ceremony to do, but it's definitely in our queue, and we have, I guess you might say, the skunk work side of Avista with people exploring how to do that and where the opportunities might be. And we're looking from everywhere from Europe at what some of the countries are doing. They're pretty innovative there on hydrogen production to, again, to some of the local resources. So, while I mentioned on the electric side of our business, we have a goal of 100% renewables by 2045. We haven't yet announced a similar goal on the natural gas side. I think you see gas utilities talking about decarbonizing the supply stream by a certain percentage by a certain date. And we just don't have that, sort of bumper sticker announcement just yet. So one significant pivot point, though, really, I think, like I started with, is I think our country's use of energy, renewable power generation is now competitive with the traditional sources like coal and gas, natural gas, and even hydro. And so now we just need to develop out the renewable natural gas resources and the hydrogen production, like you've seen at eWeb up in Eugene. But I see this as kind of that transition point. I do want to back up and make the point, though, while we may be trying to change the sort of the molecule that flows through the pipe, we all still need to recognize that energy conservation really is the most cost-effective way for us to sort of decarbonize or defossil the use of energy. And so we'll continue to chase that and work with you on all of that through our Energy Trust of Oregon work. The last thing I'll say, just in kind of recognizing what infrastructure is there in Ashland now, the citizens of Ashland have probably spent decades and decades paying for something that is in the ground. And so I'd actually suggest that we collaborate together. Again, first reduce the use through conservation, but then let's change what's flowing. And because we still see homeowners that have either a preference for natural gas on heat and hot water. We see businesses that may have processes that just can't quite reliably convert over to natural gas for whatever that manufacturing or perhaps food processing might be. And so maybe there's a sort of a less expensive way to get toward the reduction through the purchase of renewable natural gas or hydrogen production than wholesale shift. And that's not for everybody. I think there's a lot of opportunities in between. There's also, I guess, for some of the residents that we see, Earth Advantage, I think, is a good example on net zero homes, that we do have consumer behavior. Somebody still wants to take a flight to Disneyland or Hawaii, but then they're using platforms to offset that carbon. And perhaps there's some opportunities for us on the offset side of natural gas use. And with that, I'm going to stop there. I didn't think I needed to get into a lot of the numbers that I've provided to Stu over the last couple of years. I know a lot of that's been in front of you, but happy to try and field questions that you have. Thank you, Commissioner Barth.
Thank you for being here. Ray, I think you popped your hand up first. I have a few questions myself, but go ahead, Ray.
Oh, no, go ahead, Rick. You got the mic right now.
I'm curious whether there are cities where Avista provides both electricity and gas, where fuel switching is occurring, and what role Avista might be playing in that.
Well, so where we serve both electric and gas, I'm trying to think, for maybe the last 15 years, we've actually been incentivizing through cash incentives to have our electric customers actually convert electric heat over to natural gas. And the reason for that, back to the least cost plan, is it's less expensive for us as a company to acquire the gas resource than it is to go build a new power plant. And so if you think about that least cost plan, that's the side of it. The other thing that we have as an electric utility, now I work on the gas side, so I think I'm naturally biased, but I hear the electric side of the folks say this, that for us to get base load power, when somebody wants to heat their home in the middle of the night and the PV's not working or the battery storage isn't working, we're turning on our natural gas fired power plants to meet that base load because either the renewable power generation isn't tracking, and new natural gas fired power plants are only about 40 or 50% efficient. So you're losing about half of the energy, and in a 95% gas efficient furnace, you're losing about 5% of it up the flue, and you're using the rest of it. So when you're a combined utility, it kind of looks that way to us. I don't think we've necessarily measured the carbon footprint of it, but we're constant advocates as electric utility that generating power with natural gas is a very poor use of natural gas, is what we commonly say. Oh, that was a long answer.
So I've got a follow up on that then.
Yes, sir.
There are a number of studies out that suggest that burning natural gas in an electric plant and then running it through a heat pump, because of the multiplier of the heat pump, it's using heat from the environment rather than from the fuel, that you actually win from a greenhouse gas point of view to make the electricity and run the heat pump rather than directly applying the natural gas to the appliance in the home. So I'm wondering if you've seen those studies and what you think about them.
No, I'm sorry, I haven't seen the studies. Now I'm going to have to call an engineer of ours who would probably know some of that. I'm not aware.
Okay, that'd be great if you'd follow up with that.
Sure.
I would love to hear what the generic Vista Corporation thinks about all that.
Right.
So Ray, did you have a question?
Yes, Steve, I was wondering where your gas supply is coming from. And
Yep.
then the other thing is, in your discussion of biogas, I don't have any idea what's a realistic number that you could replace your 100K customers with biogas. And if you did, what kind of infrastructure are you talking about? Building more landfills, or how would you create that?
Okay, so first answer on where's the gas come from? So we've got it split. 25% we buy from BC, 50% from Alberta, and 25% from the Rockies. The molecules that actually get here are probably all coming from Alberta, because the pipeline that comes out of BC goes through Seattle, Portland, and then actually terminates in Grants Pass. And just giving the amount of load that's in Portland, Salem, and Eugene, probably not a lot of molecules that get all the way here. So if you're looking at it that way, probably most of it's coming from Alberta. There was a gas line built in the 50s to serve the Bay Area that was built out of Alberta, and it comes through Central Oregon and Klamath, and then there's a pipe that comes over the hill. As far as the biogas opportunities, the Oregon Department of Energy had a task force, 2 years ago, to identify all in-state sort of biofuel sources. And no, it's not 100%. I have heard, Dry Creek landfill by itself, what volume it would represent. And I really can't be sure. I'm going to say it could be a range of, maybe 10% on the low side and, maybe north of 25 on the high side. So, we have to find a way to make it economic for developing a lot of these resources. We still have a sort of utility commission threshold on just how expensive could it be, to develop something. At some point, people cry uncle, and so we've got to be careful, what that is.
Okay,
Did
thank you.
that answer it for you?
Yes, it gave some idea on how realistic it might be to convert everybody over.
Jeff?
Given the fact that Bonneville Power is under quite a bit of financial stress these days, and they're one of the major utility players in the Northwest, do you see any industry consolidation or shakeup in the next few years?
Are you talking about consolidation in investor-owned utilities?
Any and all?
Well, I suppose so. That there'd be large utilities that still combine. Fortunately, at Avista, we're small enough, so we operate in 5 states, but we're not like the utility in Las Vegas or other areas. We're Eastern Washington and Northern Idaho. So, somebody like Warren Buffett isn't necessarily looking at probably utilities like us, because we're not necessarily in really rapid growth areas like, I don't know, Texas or pick a state. So I'm only guessing that a little bit. I'm too far down the food chain to know what board members and officers might be talking about. And but anyhow, there's going to be some consolidation in some places. There always is. I just don't know what it looks like for us in the Western U.S.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that a little bit. There was a proposal to merge with Hydro One a few years ago, and that didn't pan out for reasons that are still a bit of a mystery to me. So are you saying that strategic direction is, as far as no longer in play? I mean, not the Hydro One in particular, but just the idea of trying to achieve scale.
Right. So the mystery behind the Hydro One failure, we thought it would be a good match, but the newly elected premier of Quebec had, in his campaign, had made remarks about taking the board of directors, firing the board. The Crown still owned like 40% of that company, and the Crown still had some management control. And so he did that, and it really spooked the regulators in Washington and Idaho, wondering, okay, so can Canadian politics reach down into Avista's operations in Ashland or Spokane, was really what the worry was. And that's primarily where I think the Washington Utility Commission said, no, this is too much risk. We're not going to allow it. And so, as far as I know, we haven't been for sale. We weren't up for sale then, but we are one of the smallest utilities in the country. And so kind of an inevitability, but there really aren't hostile takeovers of utilities because it requires utility commission approval. And then a lot of community stakeholders have to be comfortable with it. We had a lot of citizen groups from Eastern Washington and Northern Idaho who thought it was a bad idea. So they actually testified in front of utility commissions and public utility commissions to oppose it. So hopefully that helps you a little bit.
Yes, that did. Thank you. Anybody else? I have one more, if not. Does Avista have a written decarbonization plan? And if so, can you send us a link to it?
Yeah, sorry, I don't have it. So I mentioned on the electric side, we've got 100% renewable by 2045, but we're still trying to develop what the gas side looks like. I think we've got to be sort of realistic on what supplies are out there. I've heard things floated, you know, like a 30% decarbonization somewhere in the next 10 or 15 years. I've heard, you know, 100% by 2045 or 2050. I think Northwest Natural is a little further along in having sort of those declarations. So I actually appreciate your question because it allows me to sort of internally push and say, hey, you know what? We've got citizens that are expecting something. Can we, you know, work on it a little quicker? And I think kind of waiting for that Senate Bill 98 to pass was kind of a starting point for us. You know, I won't want to say we're only 5 months in. You'd think we'd be talking about this longer, and we have, but we've been kind of waiting for almost the statutory ability to make this transition.
And did I hear you say earlier that there is at least Skunk Works looking into it type stuff for power to gas technology, like is becoming quite popular in Europe?
Yeah, yep. And the one that you saw at eWeb, we're actually taking a look at that too, really close. Some people in our corporate office who are really assigned the task to, you know, look at the whole planet, who's doing it best, and you know, can we do those things here? And it is kind of neat to see something in our own backyard. You know, Eugene isn't as far away as, you know, Europe if we want to actually go take a trip and take a look at it. You know, some of those things, could we replicate that? And you know, I've talked to Adam and Stu a little bit. Is there a possibility of actually piloting something in Ashland at some point? You know, as you draw out a whiteboard of ideas, I propose that be somewhere in the list of possibilities. Probably premature for me to say, you know, how much we can spend or you know what it is, but we ought to at least be talking about it.
I heartily agree. Tanya?
Yeah, I don't know if this is a question just as much as it is just a comment. When I think about all of the different ways that we need to, you know, decarbonize our electrical system, when we look at electric providers, it's pretty obvious that they can move entirely to renewables over some period of time. You know, there's a pretty clear pathway for that. I've always sort of scratched my head in terms of natural gas providers because it has always seemed to me that there just simply isn't the potential generation out there to maintain the systems or to grow them as they might expect to as population continues to grow and that sort of thing. And so, you know, I'm interested in how the city of Ashland can sort of partner with Avista Utilities, but on some level, I don't know how we, you know, we're clear that we need to get to 100% renewable over some period of time, right? You know, and those targets are always kind of shifting and moving a little bit. But it almost seems to me like the only way to do that in terms of natural gas is to actually reduce the demand for it in order for the amount of renewables to be able to actually meet that demand. And so I guess maybe my question is, does Avista, and it's okay if you can't answer this, but you know, is there a conflict, I guess, between our fuel switching goals and trying to encourage people onto electricity? Clearly, it wouldn't be for cars, but is there some place that we're maybe going to have to really kind of dig in to figure out what might work for both of us, given that we've got a major focus on electrification?
Yeah, I suppose there's always the agree to disagree, you know, kind of conversation that we might find ourselves in. One thing I'll say is that, you know, we continue to push energy conservation and often are disappointed that there isn't more market adoption of energy conservation measures. But we also tend to recognize that is their cost too high? So for instance, when President Linda Schott, before she moved into the SOU president's house, I had heard it was going to be remodeled. I was excited. Oh, let's go take a look. Can we, you know, give an incentive on the windows? It turns out the windows by themselves was about 125-year payback on, saving on the utility bill. So realized, okay, that doesn't really make sense if that's the only reason. They still replaced the windows because they were old and condensation. But I guess I would encourage, can we chase a path even on the decarbonizing side that would be least cost plan? Can we do things that don't create economic hardship in places that we didn't intend? I talked to a brewery in Klamath Falls that looks kind of like I forget the name of the brewery over there off the freeway. Uh, yeah. So I talked to a brewery owner in Klamath Falls and I asked him, hey, could you convert everything over electric, what you've got? And he said, well, this is what it would cost and it'd probably put him out of business. I thought, okay, well, can we get halfway there? Is there, a change in the fuel that, helps reduce whether it's fossil fuel or carbon without creating some kind of economic hardship? If you look at the YMCA by itself, so I've got electric engineers in our company, and I said, what would it cost to convert a YMCA? And it could be $300,000 or $400,000 because the building wasn't built with the panels, and they've got their heat and water in a different way. And so, I kind of think of a YMCA, if you just walked in and say, yep, we're converting everything over. Can we do it a different way? And that's what I probably advocate for is there can we work together on things like that?
So just a quick follow-up. So it sounds like it's in that energy conservation space is one of the places where we might focus our energy in terms of how we might partner with Avista. Am I reading that correctly?
Oh, yeah, sure. We're not going to show up at council and start throwing rocks and saying, oh, absolutely not. Hell no, we're going to the voters. So it's just not in our nature, I think, to do that. So I'd like to find a path where we can work together. Honestly, if we can get to Dry Creek landfill or others, I think there'll be more market adoption in places like Ashland and Talent than in some of the other communities that we serve. So there's just some thoughts there, and I guess yeah. So stop there. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so kind of along the same lines, you're talking very much about retrofitting existing buildings. Then there's the whole, obviously, much slower pathway of not putting natural gas into new construction. And I think San Francisco just recently announced that they're not going to allow any natural gas going into new buildings. And that's kind of been a trend in California. I'm wondering what you're seeing in your service area for natural gas in terms of a trend towards that. And is that a way for us to make those lines come together so that not adding new demand, reducing through conservation existing demand, can be help somehow get those lines to come together so that you can serve that with biogas?
Yeah, certainly on the biogas side, I guess naturally, if if a jurisdiction were to say no, you can't put any, you can't serve any new customers, we'll advocate the opposite, right? Whether we're selling sandwiches or automobiles or something like that. That we want to be able to continue to serve people who build new commercial buildings and homes in Ashland. Now, can we work together to sort of decarbonize what that looks like, and our access to changing the supply now that we're able to might be a way to get there. Maybe I'd also kind of ask the question, if you grow your electric load, can you do it through rooftop PV and storage and those things? Or do you end up relying on BPA tier 2 power, which, yeah, there's renewables in that, but there's also a lot of coal and natural gas in BPA tier 2 power generation. And what would the good company say? I haven't studied it. I don't know what it is, but it's not the hydro dams. you know, it's like Iberdrola over in Klamath Falls, which is a gas-fired power plant. Is that what's represented in tier 2? And so then, you know, if it is, then obviously I'm going to advocate, hey, we're better. You know, we've got a lower carbon footprint per unit of energy than, you know, a BPA utility that is bumping it past what's allocated to you just from the hydro system and, you know, what's there. And if their carbon number is lower on tier 2, then I lose that argument.
Well, I think it's fair to say that we're looking into the future and that those numbers are trending in a direction that's not looking good for fossil natural gas.
Right. Sure. I understand.
We're getting close to running out of time. My expectation is that we are going to have an ongoing conversation with Avista, and that likely means Steve. If there is something that while he's here, I don't want to cut off any substantive questioning or conversation. So the rest of the commissioners, what's your feeling right now? Should we move on?
I apologize for.
So there was the first part of my question about what you're seeing in your service area for natural gas. Are you seeing the same sort of any kind of trend or any kind of discussion of that?
No, not in Southern Oregon. Not a you know, for most commercial building developers, they don't know who their tenant's going to be and if they need process heat or something. So we generally see commercial building developers, you know, go ahead and put in the gas. It could be a bakery or it could be an auto shop. I don't know. On the residential side, I think what we're seeing mostly, it would be Earth Advantage homes. So mini splits on the heat side, and then people are still wanting the amenities of, you know, gas fireplace and other things. So when I was on the Earth Advantage board, when we were creating a net zero home, you know, it was acknowledging that a lot of those buyers are going to get to net zero through additional PV or some kind of offset, because we still have consumer behavior with that, you know, preference for a fireplace or a range in the kitchen. So that's what that looks like.
Chris, did you have something?
I did. I was just curious, Steve. I'm sorry if this has already been addressed earlier, but I just wanted to kind of speak to the state of the infrastructure currently in the municipality. And I know aging infrastructure and maintenance and upkeep are another huge component of delivery of energy. And just maybe you could I know that was a big issue on what Hershey and Oak there. I may be generalizing that, but my understanding was a lot of that had to do with, was it NDL that performed that work, or the NPL? I don't know, the pipeline work that was all throughout Ashland over the last year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, so we, in Ashland, we don't have a lot of old infrastructure. And so that's not a concern. The Hershey Street was just the, you know, the city rebuilding that right of way. So we had to, you know, move a whole lot of our system that's there. So yeah, you're right. All that's going to be brand new. I thought I heard you referring to the outage we had about 1.5 years ago. And that was, honestly, it was just an accident. We had somebody turn a main valve that didn't get turned all the way back on. And and it was, that's what happened there. So no, nothing in Ashland that, or even, you know, most of our Oregon operating area, you know, it's kind of the East Coast where they've got 150-year-old systems. Ours, you know, in the Rogue Valley, are, you know, a lot of stuff is just 40 or 50 years old, or newer in some cases.
To follow up, I think that's something to really consider when we're looking at, you know, attrition or energy loss via infrastructure, whether that's electrical or gas. I mean, we're still talking about units of energy. And if I know that's something that I've seen come up in different regards in terms of our electrical grid here and instability or brownouts along those lines. So just trying to kind of look at that metric also when we consider energy units. So.
Okay, well, I think we're getting to a good conclusion point. Thank you, Steve, for coming and chatting with us. And I expect that we're going to be chatting a fair bit more. And I look forward to the action items that you took as part of this chat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next thing on the agenda is action items. As I mentioned in the memo that came out with this meeting, there's been some discussion prompted by Elizabeth about getting a commissioner to write down what the action items are as we're going along. How do you all feel about continuing that practice? And if so, who's going to do it? Well,
Is this
you're not speaking up, so the chair might start making a proposal.
so this is a request by Elizabeth?
Well, originally it was, yes, but I actually
Okay.
think it's a good idea that there be somebody that's writing down the action items. Elizabeth, you have something to say?
Yeah, and I one of the things I suggested was just at the end have a general roundtable where everyone lists off the items they did. But what we've done for previous seat meetings was just assign an action person at every meeting. So it's not the same person, but every meeting someone volunteers and just keeps the items for that meeting and then discusses it after. So either one or whatever you guys decide works. So
And then sends them to you?
to then go out to the rest, yes, I can do that.
Question, when is the video available? Because if you take a couple hours and run through the video, then you could write it all down, or someone could.
Yeah, the problem we've had so far is that the video is not available in a timely fashion, and we really need the action items pretty much available immediately after the meeting.
And another part of my suggestion was that even at the end of each meeting, you guys would have a roundtable and you would talk about what the items were, when they were actually due back, because I don't believe everything has to come back the very next meeting, or maybe it does, and how those need to be delivered. You know, is it something you talk about, or do you need to write something up? So those are some things, you know, if you can discuss it at the meeting and everyone get on the same page, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, sounds like that's something we can do. We can rotate it.
Okay. I feel like a consensus is forming, but I haven't seen a volunteer for tonight.
Well, since I had experience 2 meetings ago, I can do it again tonight.
Thank you, Ray.
All right. I don't think we had anything so far except for Steve.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, I'm not overly worried about that portion of it.
Okay.
Moving on, commissioner recruitment. Does anybody have something to report on filling in our empty slots? Tanya?
I have reached out to Edward Durr and to Jay Piskenis over at SOU and AHS, and I sent them the links to the information about the commission and then a link to the application, and asked them both to forward it along to any students that they thought might be interested for the 2 student slots that we have that are sitting open. If anyone else has any connections in SOU or AHS, you know, I'd be happy to forward along the message that I sent out so you can see what how I approached them. But you know, those have been done.
At least send it to me. If anybody else wants it, it probably should go through Elizabeth.
Will do.
Jeff had contacted a couple of SOU students and talked to them. I have followed up with one of them. And just today, I sent an email to another student that he had contacted, and I haven't heard back, but it was just earlier today. So that's all I know about that. Anybody else about recruitment? If not, we can move on.
Quick question, Rick.
Go ahead.
And that is just, we have 2 empty slots that are not students, is that correct?
Just one.
Just
We have
one, just
two
lessons.
student slots plus one non-student commissioner.
Okay. So we should think about where else we might look for the general public at large, and if there's a way in that process to help bring some diversity to the council or to this commission, that would be a good start. So I don't know if there are sort of allied organizations in the community that are likely to have members that are interested in this that we might want to reach out to.
I talked to a woman who's been in SOCAN for quite a long time, and I could pass her contact information along, but she's only a part-time resident. She's half in California and half up here. So how would that work, or is that a non-starter?
Elizabeth, you're shaking your head.
I believe, no, it would have to have like a change in the code to allow someone to live outside the city limits, because technically most commissioners have to live inside the city limits.
Is there an age requirement for the non-student?
No, I don't
you
think
gotta be
so.
a voting age. Is that correct?
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think that the student position was non-voting, so,
Right. No, I just meant for the.
No, I'm
other-
talking about the other one.
oh, right, yeah.
I think that the SOU student is a voting position, is that right? And then the AHS one was non-voting?
I think it depended.
I know that we had an 18-year age issue that the city attorney said that we weren't allowed to have anyone who was under 18 vote. And then the question became, like with Xander, when he turned 18, did he automatically get a vote? And the answer that came back was no, unless we want him to take one of our general public slots at 18.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so I think it's around that particular role doesn't have the vote, but I've always assumed that the SOU one would have the vote.
I don't think that's the case, but we should check.
If that's not the case, we should fix it. It's ridiculous to have a grown person not be able to vote. In my mind, I would be willing to take that forward.
Yeah, we would be at an even number then, so there'd be that issue.
I think it's also, for the record, I also think it's ridiculous that it's an AHS student, that's interested would not be permitted to vote. I mean, really?
Correct. Right.
Yeah, that would be the question: is that prohibition something that Ashland has put in place, or is it something to do with state law? I think that would be the other question, because if both of them can be voting, and we always allowed, we've always allowed our high school students to still sort of cast their vote so that we knew what they thought about things, and we could make sure that that there wasn't this huge distinction between them. But anyhow, to whatever the council decides, I would be willing to have that conversation. Whatever the commission decides, I'd be willing to have that conversation with the council.
Okay, Ray, I'll take an action item to follow up on what the deal is on student voting.
Okay, find out what the current requirements are, and then we can move
Yes.
forward after that.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, now we have the council recommendation, staff input. There was a section of the meeting memo that is devoted to this, that lists those recommendations and has some further material in it. Assuming that you all had a chance to look at that. And so the question that was posed in that memo, well, first it was to give an opportunity for staff, and presumably this means Stu, to give feedback about this. I don't know if you have any of that, and then what does the commission want to do next? So Stu, do you have anything?
I'm just looking at this now. I read it previously. How much time do you want to spend on this? Because I know we've got just a little bit of time.
That'd be,
We had
I'm-
allocated 15 minutes, but we're 5 minutes slow right now.
Sure. Well, I don't know, where would you like to begin on here? I know that Adam had a few thoughts on this and he was planning to put some to paper, which I didn't see yet. But I'm happy to like go through with you and give you suggestions on what I think. So looking at the council recommendations, the first bullet point here, directing staff to develop the comprehensive electric and gas utility plan. I think that's fine to take to council. It's been in the SEEP since the very beginning. It's the very first action listed in the SEEP. I feel confident that we have like enough policy approval to push that action forward. But having it flagged at council's level with the new council would probably be helpful to keep things moving forward. So I guess my suggestion is that even though I feel like it's already been directed in a sense, that it wouldn't hurt to put it on the list again, because so much has changed since we passed the climate plan, and it's the first action, right? We have to do that. So I'm supportive of that. Is that enough, or would you like me to go in deeper?
Seems like plenty to me. I think you're more or less confirming what we were suggesting at the meeting that you were on vacation for.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is after the first of the year. That's when this would move forward as far as going to council. As you know, there's a agenda item later tonight to actually talk about this. So we don't need to deep end on that right now.
Okay. Developing an outreach and engagement campaign. This is happening already. I feel like having some dedicated funding would expedite things. I wholeheartedly hope to see something in the next budget that is carved out for that. Right now, there's not a dedicated fund, and in the last budget cycle, our conservation division was fortunate in the fact that we did not have any budget cuts like a lot of departments did, but we certainly didn't get an increase in funds. And so we'll either have to look for some funding to, really amplify outreach if we're not content with what's happening, or we can look at taking away from an existing program, which I imagine would be unpopular. So there's a lot of identified projects that we could ask for more funding for. The best way to do that, I'm not certain, but I think that outreach is an obvious one. So I'm supportive of that, but I also want to say that it's already starting, and I'm hoping that the new website is going to be a good first step in that direction. It's certainly not going to solve all of our outreach needs and wants. Developing staff training. I think that Adam sort of implied that this could probably be dealt with at the management level. I think it'd be fine again to take it to council, but whether they're going to approve a certain amount of hours to be spent on this or a certain amount of money to be spent, I don't know.
Yeah, and this particular one is probably also not worth deep ending on because we did chat about it a bit at the last meeting, and
yes,
Tanya and Julian and I still have an action item we haven't completed on it.
Okay. And then the last bullet here, prioritizing SEEP in hiring management positions. I've seen some of this happening already. I certainly wouldn't mind a, more emphasis on this from my perspective. I think that there could be additional highlighting of the challenges of climate action and what it means to integrate that with all the things that city staff and city management do. So again, supportive of this. I do see it happening. I'm not sure how to jolt it to a higher level, but I think it's a good idea. Is there anything else on this list that you'd like me to speak to?
Not me. How about all the rest of you? So if there's no other questions for Stu, then the question for me is, what do we do next?
What do we,
well, I'm asking the commissioners at this point.
Okay.
And Gary?
I was wondering whether there's still opportunity to talk about the list. One of the things that the commission has oftentimes discussed is the integration of the SEEP into the comprehensive plan. And for me, at least, that is a critical outcome in large part because if the SEEP was a part of the comprehensive plan, then all the master plans that the city would develop, any future annexation, any major project, new interchange would all have to be shown to be consistent with the SEEP as a part of the comprehensive plan. And so I see that as a really critical issue that we move forward. And unfortunately, that's not on the current list.
Isn't that included in the commissioner actions of engaging planning department? Was there a report on that?
Yeah, I think we're
Yeah.
actually going to discuss that at some length in 642 on the agenda, Gary.
Well, that's different than having it via,
It is, but the outcome of that discussion could be to add it to this list.
oh, okay. That'll be great then.
Okay. So absent that discussion, what does the commission want to do with these recommendations? The default from the chair's point of view is to continue to work with staff on determining if any can be dealt with entirely administratively, and if so, when, because that's critical. But if January rolls around and the new council is seated and we get some time on their agenda, then the default is to bring all of these forward unless we have discovered for some reason that no longer makes sense. So is there any discussion about that proposal? I guess I would like somebody to make a motion then, so I'm clearer about what it is should be done.
I guess I'm not totally clear on the options again, Rick, other than we have this list. We want to keep working with staff on it. Are you looking for some response from the council or staff to these lists specifically?
No, I just want to be crisp on how we're going forward on this. And as a chair, I can't make a motion, but I made a proposal and I'd like a formal motion to be brought forward so that it's quite clear what we're going to be doing. Gary?
I move that the listing and the memo be brought and added to the December agenda for final action and presumably a recommendation for council submittal.
Is there a second?
How about some discussion?
I believe you have to have a second before you discuss.
Okay, I'll second then.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Any discussion?
Yeah, bringing to council, I didn't quite understand because this list doesn't look like one you would bring ready to council. Maybe a couple items on it. I didn't. Are you looking for council? Are you looking for council to endorse these recommendations? Or you need more staff input first for them to look at, knowing that we were going to go to council with it? That's what I'm not clear.
I guess, Ray, what I was focused on were the council recommendations, the 4 items that Stu remarked upon.
Okay.
And those would come back to us for finalization in the December meeting. Once further consultation with the staff had occurred and we complete our discussion about other items that might be added.
So we would decide in December then, based on that data, when to bring to council.
Or more particularly, to whether to move those 4 items to the council as our key recommendations for January.
Okay.
Bob?
Yeah, I'm finding this all a little bit confusing. What I'm not clear on is what happens if the council doesn't do these 4 things. Does that really matter? Are these things that we want to do, that the staff want to do and we want to do anyway? Do we need the council to direct the staff like that in order for those things to happen? Or is that just a way to engaging the council so that they feel like they're doing something? And it just seems like we've got these things.
Well, what I
track
heard
anyway.
from Stu is that bringing them to council provides emphasis to staff for moving these forward, if nothing else.
Well, that's the question. Is it just emphasis to staff and nothing else? And is that enough to justify taking up council time with something that just seems mostly not particularly relevant for them, in my view, from what I'm seeing?
Stu?
I think if you folks would like to take something to council, I support having these things on the list, but I think it is good to ask, like, do you need to take up their time with this? And, frankly, I don't know how helpful it'll be. It might be helpful, especially with the electric utility planning process, to like kickstart things, bring it into the public sphere and the conversation a little bit more. On the other hand, it's probably not going to make a pile of money show up when I show up to work the next week. So mostly I'm interested in things that are going to unlock additional resources so that we can get the work done. Generally speaking, I think what works best with council is to take them something, once we know we have permission to work on it, which I think we do with all of these items, to bring them something that's, 80% baked and seek additional approval at that point. So you could take this to council if you would like, but I think also we could find another way.
Danya, did you have something?
Yeah, and just, I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind. The first is that we are going into another budget cycle having done no strategic planning. And so it's going to be, again, a difficult conversation around what happens, because there will need to be cuts. There's no question about that. And so I think it helps council to hear from, to hear priorities from groups. We don't have another sort of report back to council. I don't believe that will happen before the completion of the budget process. And one of the things we had asked, but I think never got an answer back on, was coming back to the council quarterly. So I think there is a good reason to remind council, especially the new council, and to provide to provide some background about the work that's being done for them prior to coming into the budget cycle. And so if, it's also appropriate to ask for what we want. The other piece is that there's another process that's underway about a request to council to direct staff to look to essentially optimize our sites for solar, to make that ask of council, that they direct staff to really start looking at our sites about what can be done with city-owned properties. So that is likely to come up in the early part of next year. It might be something that could be combined with something like this, but I would say you don't want a deafening silence to this new council on climate as they head into the budget process. They will not have any, half of the folks who are going to be making these decisions will not have had the background that the rest of the councilors have had.
So,
Gary?
So would that imply that what we really need to be presenting in January is what we would like to see happen in the following fiscal year, and tie each task to a budgeted amount so that the council understands that these things, in some cases at least, will require resources that aren't currently in the budget?
That's what the Wildfire Safety Commission just did. And everybody sort of sat there knowing what our financial situation is. But I think if we don't know what is needed, we don't have the information that we need to manage through that process. A budget process is a prioritization process. And interestingly, the work that's done here, some of the work anyway, is potentially work that can be done through the electric department, which is its own enterprise fund, which is different than the general fund. The general fund is going to be extraordinarily difficult to get any cash out of. Enterprise funds may be as well, but I think if we have something, we would like to, if we really think we need that outreach and engagement piece and we need funding for it, I would suggest that we sort of combine in with this other conversation that will be coming to the council about the sites.
I'm a little confused. Where's the site-specific stuff coming from?
It's
Who's
just a
doing it?
conversation. What's that?
Who is doing it? Who's going to bring it in front of council?
It's a request that's coming out of the Ashland Solar Cooperative to get some commitment from the city to really look at these sites before the next deadline of I think it's the USDA grants that they weren't able to apply to last year because it came up too late for council to approve. So they're trying to get out ahead of it this year, and it's likely to be early on the docket in the new year with the new council. So there is a climate conversation that will be being had by the council in January. If this group wants to say something to council, that would make sense to combine those.
I think the most important item on the list of the 4 is the first one, because we're missing a comprehensive electric master plan or gas utility plan. And that would fit in with any, solar or microgrids or generation. And it seems like some of these others are already happening, and I'm not sure how much we need council help with those.
Julian, did you want to say something?
Well, I just was going to say, I think it's worth bringing it to council for informational purposes. I don't think it should be presented in such a way that they should be saying yes or no to the individual items on the list. But I agree with Tanya that presenting it as an idea what's going on so they're aware of it, a good idea.
Okay, is there any further discussion? We need to be moving on pretty soon here. Bob?
Yeah, no, I would be much more in favor of a list of the things that we really need, and and in the context of a budget discussion, where we want this, where we want to make this the claim for directing some resources towards this activity. I don't see that these things really do that with just a couple. They're kind of small. They're not really big emphases that I think we need a lot of resources for. So I think
building a master plan will take some resources.
That's the exception.
Right. That's why I pointed out that first one.
I agree with that. I agree with you.
Okay, Tanya?
Quickly, I would also just remind the commission that this new council will be selecting a city manager, and that city manager will be selecting everyone else from this point forward. So that piece around getting, hiring leadership staff with climate expertise or climate focus, I think actually will be a particularly important thing for the council, given what they're going to be facing in January with that particular hire. I would leave that one in, even though there's not a budget number around it.
Stu?
Yeah, I think the last thing that I would offer is that, the list of 4 bullets are fairly generic directions, whereas the list of bulleted things under the old business part of today's agenda are all very fully formed projects. And I would, the times we've gone to council with sort of a generic list of requests, it's not produced any real results. So I do think it's a good idea to take things sort of one bite at a time, and recognize also that if we take some of their time to talk about directions to staff, that's fine, but it's going to eat into our time for more developed projects. And so if there's anything on the list of 4 bullets that seems like it should go to council, I guess I would propose that it become a larger project and get put on the list of old business with somebody dedicated to push that forward. But that's just an idea. You can do it.
We have a motion on the floor. Elizabeth, can you read it back, please?
Let's see. That the current list be added to the December agenda for finalization and then be presented to council as recommendations.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Okay. All opposed? You got to vote.
Well,
I mean, I
I
guess
can't hear you, Bob.
yeah, I thought I was on, and it turns out thought I was muted. It just feels to me like we don't have the right list. I think a number of us feel like, yes, there should be a list, but this list doesn't feel like it. So I think
I believe that this motion is bringing the list back for further discussion in December, so I'm not quite sure why you're objecting to that.
well, I was objecting because I thought that the way it was written, the way it was stated was bring this list back. I don't think that's really good, and maybe add some other things to it. I just think we need to come up with a different list. We should bring a list back, and I don't know who would do that, but I think that's what it should be.
Okay,
So
but
I'd
we
like
do
to
need to be moving on here. The way this works, by my understanding, is you either vote for it or against it, and so that we can get past this. I can't just leave the motion laying on the table.
So I
I'll
voted
try
against.
again. All in favor?
I changed my vote. I changed my vote to no.
All against? Hold your hand up if you're against this motion. Thank you. Motion does not pass. So my intent at this point is, I think insisting on the motion inspired a lot of informative discussion. So what I'd like to do is to, as part of the agenda formation for the next meeting, bring this back for further discussion. Okay, moving on. Policies and methods.
so Rick, you're going to bring that back? Working with whoever you
Yes.
need to? Okay.
Yes, agenda formation is my responsibility, and I will be working with Tanya and Stu and Julian and Elizabeth on that.
Okay.
Okay, so the next section is policies and methods, and a fair amount of time has been allocated. It's sounding like the way I had hoped this was going to go is not likely, because we did not get it, what to my mind is a key memo from Adam, who had volunteered to give us some well, never mind staff feedback, some administrator feedback about the likelihood of various of these policies getting staff attention in the near future. So that's unfortunate. I don't know whether, Stu, you've been primed to speak to this or not, but now's the time.
Yeah, I definitely can't speak for Adam and what he was thinking. I did not get a chance to debrief with him about this before he left and after I got back. But, from my perspective is this, like, there's a codified limit to how much staff time is supposed to go toward commissions. However, I'm going to be working on a lot of these policies regardless of whether you folks are working on them. So to the extent that we can align priorities and work collaboratively on it, I think so much the better. So I guess as we enter this next discussion, I would say be cognizant of the fact that I don't have infinite time, far from it, but I am eager to help you folks make all of these things happen. And in fact, some of them have been working on for a while, as I've shared with you individually. So that's a very soft commitment, but it's I guess a statement that I want to try to align as much as possible so that whatever I'm doing is helping you and what you're doing is helping me. I think we can do that. Is that helpful at all?
Yes, that is helpful. In the memo that I sent out to you folks, it talks about what the various constraints that we're operating under. And it is my personal feeling that trying to move forward every single one of these simultaneously is not going to be terribly productive and is not likely to help Ashland move towards its climate goals as efficiently as possible, and that it is important for us to prioritize these things. If there's any other comment, questions, discussion about the portion of that memo labeled next steps, now would be a good time. If not, what I'm proposing is to work our way down through this list, focusing primarily on understanding. So if there's any questions about the content of the material that was prepared, that to me is the first order. The second order is to be sure we have a set of crisp statements of what the next steps are. My personal feeling is that some of these are fairly crisp and others of them could do with a little more work, because at least I personally don't really understand exactly what would happen next. And some of them bring forward the relationship to the existing seat policy document that council has already approved, and a few of them don't yet do that. And so getting commissioners to take on the task of that, I think, relatively modest amount of work, so that they're all well tied into an approved policy document, I think is worthwhile. If there's no objections to that plan, then I would like to turn to the master plan document update.
Okay, for those of you who have maybe not had a chance to look at it, you could click on Elizabeth's link. I know there was a request out of our last meeting. We've got a lot of master plans and there were dates around, and Stu took a stab at this in September. So I took his list and updated it, and I wanted to put in what work quarter the CPC would be working on these. The other thing we want to know is how old are they and when are they going to get updated? And has SEEP input been provided? Right now, you know, we've been kind of just trying to keep up with Public Works to the plans that were already on the agenda and providing input. That's, you know, the water master plan and the TAP master plan happened since our last meeting. It went before the council for an initial review. And so that's why if you look in the work quarter, that's already on our plate. And then there's another one coming up. The storm drain master plan is in progress. And so I'm waiting for our draft in discussions with Scott on that. So I expect we'll be working on that in addition in the first quarter next year. The other thing is I wanted to capture most of the plans we're interested in providing SEEP update on. So you can see some of the things like the transportation plan in here, and the pool, and of course the comp plan. One of the things here also under electric, which Jeff will talk about, is we don't really have a electric master plan. So there was a work item that Jeff will talk about for developing an RFP to kick that off. Any questions so far? Okay.
Well, I have a few.
Okay.
I assume the electric 10-year planning study is something that the utilities focus area would have, so we could stick a U in that slot. Is that fair? In fact, both of those under
Sure.
electric.
Yeah.
And the airport master plan so far out in time, that's probably not very interesting.
Well, and that was just approved in September.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had sent you a note earlier today about the capital improvement plan. I don't see that on this list anywhere, and I'm wondering what you're thinking about that.
I may have been in the chiropractor when you sent me that, so I haven't read it.
Oh, okay. Well, so this is a suggestion that
Add another plan.
Opportunity for us to affect the city planning effort.
Okay, I'll take a look at the note and I can add it. the Parks and Rec, the pool, you had a item in your memo. So basically, we're waiting for an initial design to come back. I heard that Julian may know more about this, but I see he's not here right now, is that the initial design draft did come back, but it didn't include the request to add other sources of heat besides natural gas. So it went back to Sherwood Architects, Robertson Sherwood Architects. So Michael Black is waiting for that to come back, and we expect that soon, he said. So that's why I have a first quarter action item once we see that, to be able to constructively talk about what the options are in terms of the RF, the design coming back. So I'm curious what other options they built in, and did they do any costs, comparisons, et cetera. Okay, Gary earlier talked about the comp plan. When I look at this, most of the items in there are pre-2005. So it's been quite a while since we've had some updates. There's 14 elements. I listed 3 here that I think would be relevant in terms of needing some input. I mean, public services has to do a lot with the utilities we have. There's transportation, and then energy, air, and water. One of the questions I think before the commission we need to decide is how we're going to integrate the SEEP into this, whether we try to integrate the SEEP into each of these 14 elements, or do we do like talent, where they have 10 elements and the 10th element is they don't call it the climate energy action, they call it clean energy action plan. So that's actually one of the elements that got appended to their comp plan. So I think we need to decide which way we want to go here. Their plan was 53 pages, which was a separate element. Ours is about 125 currently. So I think we need some direction in terms of what we want to do there. And the other thing is, it's not clear to me when any of those would be updated. So there's several open items that we need to settle to go forward on updating the comp plan. And then the last one here was just the SEEP itself. And I think, Rick, you told me first quarter, we're going to start looking at that.
That is what the commission had agreed to, and I think August or September, one or the other. We had intended to take it in front of council to seek permission, but at this point, I think that's just the default.
Okay, some
Gary?
discussion.
Ray, one of the statements that you made was that most of the comp plan needs to be updated. And I think that really speaks to why it would be important to have the SEEP be a new element to the comprehensive plan, is because at that juncture, then each successive update of any of the 14 chapters in the comprehensive plan would have to demonstrate consistency with that clean energy action plan. And as I said earlier, furthermore, as an element of the comprehensive plan, any new annexation, new project, new interchange, say at Mountain, a master plan in the future, all would have to demonstrate consistency with the clean energy action element of the comprehensive plan. And to me, that provides a kind of a central clearinghouse that isn't otherwise available to us. And furthermore, we don't have to wait possibly a decade or more for each of the existing comprehensive plan elements to be updated to reflect or incorporate the SEEP. So in my mind, pushing hard to get the SEEP included as a part of the comprehensive plan is not only timely, but also strategic.
Tanya?
Yeah, so, there are 2 different ways that communities update their strategic plan, and we can see that between Ashland and Talent. One is to just do it all at once, which is a major lift, but then you get it done. And the other one is to do it piecemeal. And Ashland's been doing it piecemeal. I think the latest one has been the housing element. I expect there is going to be, after the budget process, I would expect that there's going to be some sort of a strategic planning effort. I know that I've been pushing for it, and some other folks have been as well. That following behind that, whatever we come to in that might be the point where it makes sense to redo all of the strategic plan or all of the comprehensive plan at once. When you have a fresh strategic plan, and now you've got all of these different comprehensive plan elements that are no longer in alignment with this new strategic plan. So I think you can decide what you want to bring forward. There's a couple of different ways you might think about this. One is to say, we think these particular elements need to be prioritized as you march through them every 18 months or so as they re-up them. But we would like to see you just do a full update of the full comprehensive plan. Right. But if you're not going to do that, here are the ones that we think need to be done sooner rather than later. I haven't seen the schedule, Stu. I don't know if you've seen it, of which order they're planning to go in. But that's something that I could talk to Bill Molnar about. What might that look like, and what are they planning to tackle next? Because it may be that one of these might be on tap for the next process. I know they're planning to just sort of go one to the next.
Yeah, I haven't heard what would be scheduled next. My guess is that there is nothing scheduled at the moment. I think that adjusting the comp plan is one of the most important things that this commission can help with in the long run. But also be cognizant of the fact that it takes a tremendous amount of staff time to update even one element of this. So we'll have to be very realistic about where's that time and energy going to come from, and how long will the public engagement process take. The other thing I just throw out there is that a lot of the elements in the comp plan are required by the state. Not every community has every element. But in the times I've talked with planning in the past and looked sort of at what other communities are doing, I think that updating chapter 11, which is the energy, air, and water, would be a good home for our climate goals. We could add something also in there, but we already have a section that's dedicated to energy and climate sort of, and that's a section that's quite outdated and could be up next. The last thing I would say is that the way Ashland's comp plan is written, it's typically big picture goals in the comp plan. I think you all know this, but just for the sake of being on the same page, big picture goals in the comp plan, and then technical documents that lay out how to actually get that all done. And those can be adopted into the comp plan as they get updated. So just keep that in mind. If we do an electric master plan document, we could subsequently adopt that in as the sort of nuts and bolts of what chapter 11 or whichever element houses the climate goals. Hopefully that makes
Gary
sense.
and then Chris. I think you each had your hand up. No?
I was just going to say, in my conversation with Mr. Molnar earlier, I think one of his approaches that he recommended was, to essentially amend the comprehensive plan with a chapter acknowledging the SEEP document as a supporting technical document or appendix, if you will, to the comprehensive plan as a strategy rather than perhaps chapter by chapter. I think that would provide broad inclusion as a potential.
Gary?
Unfortunately, that approach simply makes it a reference document. It doesn't carry the power of law. In order to change the environment, change climate, we need policies that become standards, that whether it's PV, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's the transportation system, whether it's a public facilities plan, all of those need to adhere to a adopted comprehensive plan element. Simply having a reference to that document doesn't provide the legal binding requirement that the city conform to that chapter. And so while I acknowledge what Bill was alluding to was fine for his purposes and fine for the purposes of adding some administrative requirements for development. It doesn't address the bigger picture, which is ensuring as we move forward in the future that everything conforms to a climate element that would then provide the seat a resting place in terms of city policy and statewide planning law.
Two quick follow-ups to that, just for clarification. So Bill did say that the comprehensive plan is not a basis for adjudication, right?
No, he said no. What
he
said
did
was,
actually. This is verbatim. So the comprehensive plan is not utilized as a policy for adjudication. That's just, I don't want to debate that. That was something, and that it provides guidance for action-oriented items, land use changes to code. So it's a guidance policy. It's not a legally binding plan.
you don't know the state law. The state law requires that any land use action be consistent with the comprehensive plan. If it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan, then the Land Use Board of Appeals and the state courts will not uphold it. So let's say there's a new interchange proposed at Mountain. If that interchange were built and that project wasn't reflected in the comprehensive plan, it wouldn't be built because it isn't consistent with the comprehensive plan. That's the real power of the comp plan, is that it provides the context for everything that occurs, and it is very much law. Now, in terms of carbon, under the air, water, and land goal, carbon isn't explicitly acknowledged. So carbon emissions aren't currently a part of the statewide planning goals. Carbon, CO is, particulates, ozone, all those regulated by the EPA are covered as a part of the air, land, and water goal under the statewide planning goals, but carbon is not. So in order for us to actually have carbon be a central element of our land use planning program, we have to, under a particular statute, Oregon Revised Statute 197, incorporate that into our comprehensive plan. Without it, we can't draw upon that metric in assessing how well or how poorly a land use action fits with the comprehensive plan. I think in terms of the code, that's a different thing, and that is very explicit and has measurable standards, unlike the comprehensive plan, which is the overall guiding document that serves, again, to ensure that our future is what we want, not something that happens randomly.
Okay, so we have a little over a half hour, well, not even a half hour scheduled for 15 items, of which we're on number 2.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of anticipating this is where we were going to get, because each one of these things is going to require a fair amount of discussion in order for all of the commission to reach the same plane of understanding. So I want to pause marching through these things for a second and see what the commission wants to do about dealing with all these and hopefully prioritizing them. We're not going to be able to march through all of them tonight,
Right.
given the amount of discussion we're giving each one of them. That's just not going to happen. So what do you want to do? Do you want to just see how far we get and then take it up in December? Or do you want to gloss over all these details, which I'm finding very educational? Which way do you want to go?
I think I'd like to cover more than just this one item. I think I'd like to find out what the staff plans are for any updates to the comp plan. It's something that Tanya mentioned earlier, I think. So we have some timetable of understanding when they're want to revisit this or look at it or update it. And then we obviously have some more work to do to decide how we integrate the SEEP. And if the SEEP doesn't reside here, where will the SEEP reside? And where does it need to reside so it has teeth?
Okay, what I'm hearing from you is that you want to keep on going with 642, in which case probably most of the rest of this agenda is just going to fall off the end of the meeting, or do you want to move on?
I could make a suggestion. Why don't I
Tanya?
check with Bill Molnar and see what his schedule looks like? He does have one. He does have an order that they're looking at the comprehensive plan. They told us that when they came in front of the council. If I can get that, maybe that'll help the future conversation.
Yeah, it always helps to know when we got to have something ready that the staff is working on. So
I completely agree. I am utterly frustrated with not knowing where this is going, even from a historical perspective.
Okay.
So if all of you are okay with Tanya taking that action item, that's fine, but that doesn't actually address the question I was posing, which is that there was 15 items and we are on number 2 and running out of time. So do you want to skip the details and just plow through these and answer obvious questions, or do you want to do roughly what we're doing now and we'll just see how far we get? Jeff?
Are we limited the commission to one meeting a month?
That was the conclusion of our discussion in either September or October. I don't remember which. Yes. Okay, I'm not hearing any discussion, so.
I'll give it a reaction. I mean, I think this was a useful discussion about on this particular item. I'm hoping that we can actually limit ourselves to less deep dive in each of the other items. And my sense is that they may be somewhat simpler because they're narrower in focus. This really took a lot of plan. So I'd like to move on with the action item that Tanya suggested, and try to work our way down through the list and try to limit ourselves, try to exercise some discipline so that we don't take too deep of a dive on any one of them. See how far down the list we can get.
Okay, is there any objection to that? Hearing none, that's what we'll do. So I think we're ready to move on to the electric utility strategic plan. So Jeff, I think you're up.
Okay, thank you, Rick. I'll try to move through this fairly quickly. The first page is the one-page task description that we were asked to put together. So it outlines the strategy and the goals linked to the SEEP, and then 4 identified tasks. And today we're only going to talk about task A. So if you would move to the second page, this is a draft outline of an RFP to develop an energy utility strategic plan. So, and again, it's an outline, and we haven't really had a chance to talk with Stu or folks in the city about this, but this is kind of the starting point. So basically develop a strategic plan for the utility that provides a roadmap for future power contracts, as well as a transition from fossil fuels to electricity across the spectrum: transportation, residential, and commercial. So we came up with kind of 3 basic goals or groups of goals here. The first is kind of the standard that any proposal, anything that we do has to provide safe, secure, reliable service that's compatible with the SEEP. And then the next tier, which is very important going forward, is competitive market rates. The electric utility market is changing quite rapidly with solar and wind coming on board. Our primary supplier now, or I guess our supplier now, BPA, is kind of struggling. They've got a lot of sunk costs in infrastructure that's no longer as competitive as it used to be. So there's some real challenges here moving forward as to how we source competitive electricity that also meets our other goals. And then finally, referencing the Alameda fire and earthquake hazards, we've got to make sure that our system is resilient to natural disasters and so on. And Bob?
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is really great, Jeff. I thought that the suggestion was that we were going to go through it and only people, I mean, we all had a chance to read it, and hopefully we all have done that. And we should kind of focus our time together on some questions, clarifying questions, rather than get a presentation from you, which is excellent, but maybe we can just go straight to questions if people have that. That's my suggestion, is conserve our time together.
Right. So to move forward with this, there's a number of questions. Obviously, the biggest one that Rick came up with is, do we limit the scope to just the electric utility, or do we wrap in natural gas Vista and look at a larger energy in addition? The second one was, do we just focus on Ashland, or do we reach out and try to include other municipal utilities in this effort in an RFP? Do we need community input now, or do we issue or at least have a draft RFP before we get community input? And then and this is really, I think, part of city staff's number 4 is how do we select the consultant, and how is the contract to do this work structured? And then the timeline that we tentatively came up with was the end of 2021. And then last, but certainly not least, how does this work get funded? So open for discussion.
Tanya?
I'm just wondering how this connects with what we've been talking with Tom about at the electric department and the master planning process that they have underway. Is it essentially the same thing? Are we trying to impact that planning process? Or are we suggesting a completely different one?
There has been no commitment from town to bring forward a electric utility master plan absent this effort that we're talking about right now.
So how does it link with the planning process he's been talking with us about?
This is it. When he came to the commission in September, I think it was, I posed the question to him about whether he was going to lead this effort, or if he was looking for this commission to lead this effort. And I believe his response was that he was looking forward to the commission putting something in front of him. Let's do.
Yeah, I think that this is the same process, and I agree, Rick, with your recollection there. I think that Tom is looking for an initial starter from this group. So I would propose that the appropriate next step, since I hadn't looked at this because I was gone the last meeting and just now, I think it's appropriate to take this document that Jeff presented and talk to Tom about it. I know they had some funding set aside, and this, if I can just speak quickly to the open question number 1 about what's the scope of this, I think that this sort of speaks to my idea of enshrining the climate goals, Ashland's community goals, in the comprehensive plan. But for purposes of policymaking, I think it would be smart to split the 2 utilities apart. That's just my opinion.
So in the interest of time, my proposal is that some combination of Stu and Jeff and myself, and I don't know, Ray, if you want to be involved with this, or Tanya, meet with Stu and Tom and see where we go from here. Okay. Then I think we move on to the energy retrofit loan program. Bob? I can't hear you. Oh, you're not speaking. Yeah, no.
I've got that's because I have not unmuted myself, but now I have. okay, this is something that Tanya and I put together. I don't think I need to go through the whole thing. It's linked to the SEEP. I think our next tasks are really to review experience with energy retrofit programs, and I've gotten some good links from Stu. And then once we've got that, start to really identify the program options and sources of financing. But I think that'll happen kind of naturally over the next couple of months. And then once we got those, we analyze the administrative and financial feasibility for the city of each option. I don't know. Do I need to go through these items, or should we just?
I propose that we not. I don't personally have any questions, so I would just like to open the floor to questions about this document.
Okay.
One question I had, Bob, are you exploring the city as a financial lever, if you will? Or I know we talked about that at one point, the city having its own financing program for these loans, or would these be privatized?
I don't know. I think we have to put all the options on the table. I think the city is a bit cash strapped, and I think Stu had talked previously about getting a grant that we, I guess, did not get. So that which would be a grant to the city. Therefore, the city would be doing it. So I'm sort of inclined to think of the city being providing credit enhancements rather than managing a fund itself. That said, the on-bill financing could be an important part of it, because that's a way to keep the customers, to keep track of the customers, to collect from the customers, so you don't have whatever fund it is incurring that cost. But I think those are design questions that we have to analyze and propose. Did I answer your question, Chris? Is that?
Okay, are there any other questions about this one, or should we move on to the next? Because what I'm hearing is a reasonable plan for the next step. And if there's no objection to that, then I'd like to move on to the next one. Is there any objection? Seeing none. Let's see, Julian's not here, so we'll skip that one. So Bob, you're back on for the municipal facilities plan.
So this one I only took on because nobody else took it on. I don't really feel a lot of ownership gets over it. So I just tried to draft some things, and I would love to have somebody else take it on or build on this, or it seems to me like it's something that we need to do, clearly, but I don't know who should do it. And maybe, and Stu, and I have not had a chance to talk with Stu about it. I would have benefited from getting some Stu's input on this before sending it around.
So my feeling is we have to prioritize, and if this one was to drop off, I personally would be okay with that, and I'd like to hear what the other commissioners feel about it.
I feel in a lot of ways we need to encourage the city as much as possible to lead by example. I feel like if we're mandating certain private requirements in development, they need to see the city conduct those enhancements first, and that's just my thought on it.
Jeff?
Sorry, I think I agree with Chris, but I think the highest value target would be the pool. Highest visibility.
So just a question of fact. It was unclear to me as I went to the SEEP whether the city already has a city facilities energy audit, or whether which could be updated, or whether that would be starting from scratch.
I can chime in just for a second, if that's okay. There's an old plan, which is probably woefully out of date at this point. Also, the needs for facilities are changing a lot with COVID. So I guess I would suggest that it's a good time to do a new one. I don't see the CPC having to actually do the work of developing a facilities plan. I see this more as like an advocacy to council. Feel free to disagree with me. But I think that likely this will be something staff does as part of their regular duties. So we just need to make sure that's on the radar.
Bob?
Then hearing Stu on that, and it sounds to me like that's something that we absolutely want to put on our list of items for the council for the first session, because this is totally in their bailiwick.
And I would just add in there that we are trying to fix Pioneer Hall in the community center. And there's a major move down to the Hardesty property. And so energy should be a major part of all of those conversations. So I would agree that it needs to, there's some timeliness to it.
Okay. Well, Bob has tried to stand back. Is there somebody who's going to step forward? Bob?
I mean, I'm hearing Stu that this is not something that the CPC needs to do, that it just, we identified it as a need, but it's a staff activity. I'd be happy to continue to keep track of it, working with Stu or whoever else in the city makes sense to do.
One recommendation I have is to just amend task 1 to identification of sort of gross energy users, if you would, or a hierarchy of city buildings. I think that all that energy information should be readily available from the city to identify which buildings specifically are using the most energy.
Yeah, I believe most of that was in my last presentation to council, which is online from I think it's April 20th meeting or thereabouts. But also we've got some on the dashboards, which I can point you to, whomever is working on that.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is Bob, sorry, Bob, you're going to take this thing on and bring something back at a future commission meeting?
Yes, okay.
Okay, then let's move on. But you're up next again, home energy score program.
Who created this list?
Just a second, Rick. I thought there was an action item to add this to the council list.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, all right.
Okay, same thing. I've had some good input from Stu in the last week or so about examples of home energy score programs in Portland and in other places as well. So I think we've got a really good leg up, and it's just a matter of kind of working through the steps. Unless people have questions, I don't know that I need to go through the specific stats.
I'm fine with the way it is. Anybody else have a question? Nope. Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. Sorry.
Go ahead, Ray.
So Bob, you're looking at what we currently have available for an energy score. And if that needs improvement or use something else that another city uses?
Yeah, so the point really was just to learn from Portland first. If there is any need to amend it, Stu pointed out that I think it was Milwaukee has adopted one that's slightly updated, taking advantage of some of the experience from Portland. So I don't know that we need to make dramatic changes, but you might as well take advantage of experience.
Okay, so it's really like updating what we currently have. All right, thanks.
Just to clarify, there's not currently a program for home energy scores in Ashland. This would be proposing to create a mandatory one of some shape. And it's also something that Oregon Department of Energy is actively encouraging communities to do. So there's a lot of support from the state on that end. And the last thing I would say is I think of the list of potential policies here, this is one that we could really move fairly quickly. So just keep that in mind.
So Stu, I guess I was thinking you can get an energy score on your house, but you're saying this is more mandating one in Ashland?
Yeah, that's correct. The Milwaukee and Portland programs require getting a score when you sell your house.
Okay, okay.
When you list your house, actually, that's one of the interesting questions is whether you should require it when you list your house or when you close.
When you list.
So.
Okay, so I'm still hearing that Bob, you're on for moving this forward with Stu and whoever.
Yep.
Okay. EV ready, Chris?
Yes, so general informational report on that. I'm going to assume everybody read through it in terms of, background on that. Really, I think the main caveat there is does this fall under land use ordinance or building code? Stu followed up essentially with some background information as well directly to me in regards to Governor Brown's Executive Order 1704. directed the building code division to include solar ready standard for new buildings. That's kind of in limbo right now, pending a new BCD director. I think there's some interesting incentives occurring on this portion of it. I think one thing I'm not sure of right now is it feels like land use is sort of putting that on the building department, and building department's putting it back on land use. So I think there's a little bit of legal clarification that needs to occur between the two departments.
Any questions? Okay, this one seems clear to me. And so Chris, you're gonna keep moving it forward. So you're up again for PV reservation.
PV reservation, I felt like we had some potential there, specifically in communication with the planning department here. They brought up the solar reserve hearing in late 2015 and how there is potential to revise that language, I believe, in terms of building orientation. And that's a reference to solar orientation standards. I feel like we could draft an amendment, and it was actually encouraged to bring that in front of council again and see if we have a council partial to adoption of this. So that's something I would like to prepare, I think, in early 2021 for bringing forward to council.
Any questions? Hearing none. Oh, Tanya?
Is this something that the commission, sorry, is this something that the commission should think about in terms of its list
I think so.
coming to council?
I would like to see it included on the list.
Okay. Gary, can you write that? No.
Right.
I got it.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. Okay, transportation plan. I think we're done with that one. So now, Gary, I think you're up for the transportation plan.
Right. Nothing's happening there because it's been postponed. So when it starts again, I'll participate presumably in the Citizen Advisory Committee. So that's, any questions? So the next item is a initiative that the Transportation Commission, the Climate Conservation and Outreach Commission, and I hope the Carbon Policy Commission joins forces to try to document the benefits of changing the speed limits in the city to the degree that is allowed under law. One of the items that I had hoped the policy committee would take is appointing me as the representative from the CPC to that work group. Simple as that. We'll bring back a detailed report describing what those benefits are. And I hope the commission, our commission that is, will be able to consider that memo at the January or February meeting.
Bob?
Any questions?
I moved to appoint Gary to be the CPC's representative in that work group.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
I think just to speak to it, I think Gary's the logical person on the commission to do it. He's been working on these issues. He's been advocating for it. I think he'll do a great job. Love to support him on it.
Thank you.
Ray?
Gary, I see this is an area where you're looking to use some of those funds.
I think that's
Clean Fuels Credit Funds.
appropriately right. Yeah, I think that's an area where the discussion in the January meeting would fold into this topic. As I recall from last meeting, the allocation or the commission's recommendation to the council on how to allocate those funds is scheduled for the January meeting. So while yes, I'm hoping that the commission will see that this is a worthy project, I think the discussion can happen in January.
Okay. My concern with this, I think it's fine to go and engage with the work group. And long term, I like the general idea. I'm concerned that the impact on the citizens is going to come into conflict with other things that we need to engage the citizens about. For example, the electric utility strategic plan and the home energy score program. There's, I think, a finite amount of bandwidth we have for engaging the citizenry. And so at some point in the future, I don't propose we start this discussion tonight because I think it would take a while. We need to figure out what's going to happen when and whether my concerns are valid or not. But I just want to go on the record that I have them. I think what might be useful is for Gary and I to chat about all this offline and come back with something at a future meeting. Does that sound reasonable?
I think the benefit analysis will help to clarify the widespread benefits of reducing speeds and the relatively small impact that it has on each of our travels. We're talking reducing the citywide carbon emissions by 2,800 metric tons per year at the cost of simply a few seconds of citizen time traveling from one side of town to the other. So it seems to me to be a worthy undertaking and one that will have significant impact.
Okay, I'd like to have a more extended discussion about it, but I don't want to do it right now. And actually, Tanya, would you be willing to participate in that discussion? Good.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's take that as an action item. The three of us are going to chat and then come back to the commission at some future meeting.
Point of clarification, I think, is it true that this committee is already formed? This work is a already formed work group by the Transportation Commission. So our action tonight is appointing Gary to be a part of it. Is that right?
Actually, the Transportation Commission meets next Thursday, and I think the Conservation Commission meets the following Thursday. So it actually won't be formed until that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Bob. I really ought to have a motion about that. The appointment of him to this work group.
I made an
Bob made the motion.
I made the motion. I made the motion. I think somebody seconded it. I think we just need to vote.
Yeah, we need to vote on it. So all in favor? It's unanimous, I think. Did I see you raise your hand, Tanya? No. All opposed?
I'm a liaison. I don't think I have the vote anymore. Do I still have a vote?
Yeah.
You're still voting now.
Still a voting member.
Okay. Yes.
And I want to put a plea in for a nice catchy name like Road Diet. I think that's just so funny. As an outsider, to hear people getting so exercised about the Road Diet, it just makes me smile.
Yeah, no, that's going to be part of the chat that I want to have.
I know.
Yeah, really.
Road Diet.
A favorite among the big truckers.
There you go. Okay, so thank you for keeping me on track. Is there anything else with lightweight vehicle C? If not, we should move on to D.
Right. This is one that I think is a little bit outside the realm of Electrify Ashland, but it seems like one of those things where it needs to happen, or at least it warrants pursuing a bike share or a bike loan program of some type or another. As you all know, the current bike share, the one that was around, has gone bankrupt, and we are now without a bike share program. I'm working in concert with Stu to explore the options for potentially at least using that fleet for and repurposing it, in this case as a loan program as contrasted to a share program. The details haven't been worked out. It's just something that I'm working on.
So I have
Any
one question of
questions?
information. Yeah, I have one question of information. How much utilization did the bike fleet get prior to the bankruptcy? That would be a useful thing to know.
Yeah, I can speak to that. It increased year over year, but our bike share was kind of a unique beast and it was never built for success. So if I had told you what the utilization number was, which I don't remember, it was less than impressive. You know, it's not going to speak to what we hope to achieve with the next bike share, which is a system that has a greater density of bikes and a more concentrated user base. The Rogue bike share was actually initially conceived as something that was valley-wide, and there were stations all the way up to Central Point. Same number of bikes, they were just way spread out. So over time, they consolidated into Ashland, and then they went bankrupt. So that's sort of the backstory. I'm still working on a replacement bike share, hopefully for next year. That'll come to you when I or Gary or both of us have more to say about it.
Bob?
Yeah, I saw 3 bike share programs in Washington, D.C. fail before we finally had one that was massively successful. And now there are 2 or 3 others that have built on with electric options and everything else. So I think the situation is changing now, that the conditions for success are maybe there or could be there. The only other thing is I'd like that Stu said that it was valley-wide. It would be really nice to develop a bike share option that does include Talent and Phoenix as well. I don't know about Central Point. It seems a little bit far without sacrificing the density.
Right. Without going into great detail, I think it would be good to include neighbors in that. Of course, we'll have to figure out funding. A lot of the communities who used Zagster previously we've had a group conversation about what would a statewide bike share look like. It remains to be seen whether that will be viable, but we may have an option for an interoperable bike share between several cities.
Okay, we're getting close to running out of time. What I'm hearing is that, Gary, you're going to continue to work with Stu on this and bring something back to the commission later. Okay. Engage planning department. Chris and Gary. I don't know who wants to speak to this.
Why don't you go ahead, Chris?
Okay, just really quick, 2 points that I saw as beneficial to our commission here. One was the wildfire hardening. So state building code was amended with wildfire mitigation code. This was in the notes there. It's left up to individual communities for enforcement. In terms of wildfire hazard overlay, council has been presented with the intent to reach out to development community for review of incorporating wildfire mitigation code, adopting to Ashland building standards. So I think that is a leverage point, if you will, that I think we could work with council. Those would be incorporated changes to construction materials for wildfire hardening in terms of the building code division. The other point I wanted to speak to is the conservation density bonus discussion. And I think there is opportunity here for CPC to modernize this. Currently, it's based on Earth Advantage standards. I think we could incentivize development standards here, specifically towards the development community, more in line with our C plan and specific to perhaps a adopted platform that really meets some of our goals in relationship to the C plan. So I think this is another point we could work with council towards incorporating meaningful development standards.
I got a couple of process requests. Next time, I assume you're going to pursue this, and next time you spin this document, if you could put the SEEP goals and actions relationship into it. And I didn't see the same kind of step-by-step, or at least what the next step is. And so it wasn't entirely clear to me. If you could refine that a little bit, that would be useful to me.
Understood.
Any other discussion on this one? Okay, Gary, phase out gas-powered lawn and garden equipment.
My sense of this is that the Built Environment Committee, when we were meeting, had finalized a draft ordinance, and with Bob's help, we basically developed a strategy for implementation. I think at this point, it would be terrific to have our commission communicate with the Parks and Recreation Commission over their response to our draft ordinance, in that they are really the first, the lead agency, so to speak, in phasing out gas-powered lawn and garden equipment. And so getting their explicit response to the ordinance would be a way to inform us to whether there are changes that are needed, or whether we should be advancing this proposal to the council. Clearly, phasing out gas-powered lawn and garden equipment is going to either increase the amount of time that people spend on such tasks, or alternatively limit the amount of area that they can blow, for instance. That's the trade-off, I think, that is implicit in phasing out that kind of equipment. It's all about carbon. It's all about protecting the health of workers. Those two things together, to me, are motivation enough to move forward with this. But I would really like to have the commission formally ask the Park and Recreation Commission to comment on the ordinance. It's unfortunate that Julian's not here, and that he's a member of the Parks and Recreation Commission, and he might be able to kind of inform us to the efficacy of doing that. But barring that fact, I would like to recommend that we initiate their review.
Okay, so this sounds like you're asking for a formal action. So could we have a motion for that? Stu, do you want to comment first?
Comment before that. You know, I don't think an ordinance is a bad thing to talk about, but if we're looking at the city and taking a leadership position, we don't need an ordinance for that. So maybe a good step would be to invite somebody from Parks to come and speak to what's possible within their existing resources. I know from my previous conversations with them that if they're going to do any kind of major equipment transfer, switching over to electric, they're going to need significant amounts of money, and it's going to change their workforce requirements and so on. So maybe we invite a discussion with them before we put, you know, proposed code in front of them.
Yeah, I would propose that a subset of the commission go and have a chat with those folks before we take up commission time in talking about this. Are you, or Gary, are you okay with that?
The disadvantages is the ordinance is really focused on the entire community, private, public, everyone, household owners, commercial operators, everyone. And without that context, I think the Parks Department would feel singled out. I think they need to understand that we're looking at a broader, more comprehensive approach to the phase out. And while they're first on the list, it kind of follows, like we've been talking about, the city needs to be in the leadership role and taking the initiative.
Okay, we have like 1 minute left. So I was proposing that you just, Stu had raised some questions of fact that could be found out from the Parks Commission by just talking to them and then bringing that information back. Are you, I didn't quite get, Gary, whether you were objecting to that course of action or had an alternative course of action in mind?
Well, and out of all due respect to Stu, I think commission to commission, discussions are a valuable and important part of the operation of city government, and there's really too little of it that happens. And this is one instance where I think that conversation in a formal sense would be advantageous.
Okay, so are you proposing we invite somebody to one of our future commission meetings outside of the reports from representatives of other commissions, or what?
Actually, I'm suggesting that we simply forward the ordinance as drafted to the Parks and Recreation Commission and ask for their feedback and observations so that, again, we can digest that feedback and assess whether we're on the right track or not.
Okay,
It's
I
basically
understand now.
a check, a data check.
Yep. Yeah, so I think I understand. Does everybody else, Bob?
When we were discussing this last, just before this was actually in the packet that went to the Climate Policy Commission in March. I'm not so clear about an ordinance at this point. I'm clear about an implementation plan and a strategy, which involves an engagement, an active engagement with the Parks Department, and really using, to use Chris's term, the city actually taking the leadership role and walking the talk. First before asking everybody else to do it. So I see this as, if you look down at the document that's in the link that is in Gary's document, it says the approaches start with the city, ask the city to actually take the lead and model it and see how it actually works and keep track of all of the costs and all of the trade-offs. So I think it is definitely very important to have a conversation with the Parks Department, not necessarily the Parks Commission, not about an ordinance, but about, let's do this together. Let's let the city take the lead, and then we'll
Okay,
figure
we are out of. I'm sorry, I have to break in here. We're out of time. We're over. So I think Bob and Gary and Stu, if you want to chat about it and bring this back at the next meeting, that would be fine. But we're done. I'm sorry, but we're just plain out of time. We did not get to reviewing the action items nor prioritizing any of these things. That's not particularly unexpected on my part. And we will do what we can to form the agenda for the next meeting. It's been incredibly productive, and I thank you all for all the work that you did. Gaveling it closed. We're done. Thanks.